Honestly, I can't believe I'm still alive.
Really?
5 overdoses on life support. I've been stabbed a couple times.
You overdosed 5 times?
Yeah.
What is that experience like?
First time I thought I got abducted by aliens.
You got a very personal story with addiction, and then you turned it into this massive business opportunity.
I'm actively doing this recovery process, and I'm changing from the inside out. And I start to get excited about it.
You're addicted.
I'm addicted to it.
You got sober, you had a business. When you sell the business, you're not going to work anymore.
Here's what actually happened. I'll be raw and real. I fell apart. I have more money than I've ever even seen in my life, and I'm not fucking happy. The one thing that I attribute my transformational experience to is this one part of the process.
Okay.
There's this process that they call...
All right, guys, bang, bang. I've got Eric here with me. I thought a great place to start is exactly why I started following you on Instagram. Is I saw you talking about addiction one day, and I was like, oh, all right, let me go learn more about this. And in fact, I don't know that much about it, right? I think I probably have an obsessive personality. So I've always been somebody who tries to avoid a lot of vices because I'm like, I probably would end up in a bad place. But you've got a very personal story with addiction, and then you turned it into this massive business opportunity. And so maybe just where did this all start? Where did you start getting addicted to things when you were in high school, earlier, college? Tell me some of your story.
No, much earlier. Alcoholism and addiction is a funny condition, and I think that it shows up in people in 2 ways. One is I do think that you can use and drink yourself over an imaginary line that you're never going to come back on the other side of. Okay. You see people that have a normal relationship with alcohol, and then at some point in their life, maybe something happens and they're responsive to that, and they become an alcoholic. Others, I think, are born that way. And that was me. I had addiction since I was very little. I did everything in excess. And so, I grew up in a town called Salem, New Hampshire. It's about 35 minutes north of downtown Boston, suburb of Boston, very blue collar. My father was a logger. He cut trees down for a living. My mom was generally a stay-at-home mom. Kind of a crazy childhood with, a wild household and 2 wild parents.
Was it fun?
No.
Okay.
I had a generally decent child. Well, when you're a fucking kid, you don't know. Can I swear?
Yeah.
You don't really know the difference, right? You could grow up in Iraq and bombs are going off and that's your normal, right? And so for me, that was my normal, but it was loud. It was crazy. I was around drugs, alcohol in the neighborhood. And my parents got divorced when I was in 5th grade. And that was kind of this pivotal moment for me. And I started drinking and I started smoking pot, and I was 10 years old. I've always been the kid with this lemonade stand and fixing up bikes and making a buck. And so that was the beginning of the journey for me. I started using drugs and alcohol. I also started selling drugs at 10.
Wait. At 10 years old, you're drinking alcohol and you were also smoking weed, doing crack, what?
Smoking weed.
Smoking weed. At 10 years old.
Smoking weed. I'm drinking stolen beers out of the friends' parents' refrigerators. I'm drinking wine. I'm drinking Mad Dog 2020s. And I remember
whatever you can get your hands on.
Old heads, right? And then an older kid in the neighborhood fronted me at first an ounce of weed, which turned into a quarter pound. And I think to this day, as far as I know, I still have the state of New Hampshire's record as the youngest individual charged with a drug sales charge.
Really? How old were you?
10 years old, 5th grade.
You were 10 years old and you got arrested for selling drugs.
Hand to hand to a confidential informant.
Really?
Marijuana. Yeah.
So walk me through what that looks like. So you're 10 years old, an older guy in the neighborhood, he gives you some weed and he's like, go sell it.
And then come back with the money.
You basically just get the difference.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, anyone that's old enough to remember, these were cool, at least up in the north at the time. They had Jinko jeans. Remember Jinko jeans?
Yeah.
My parents would never buy me any fucking Jinko jeans. I was like, I'm getting them jeans. And so that's what happened. I started selling weed and hustling to get things that I wanted. It progressed very quickly for me. Alcohol, weed turned to trying coke, turned to trying pills, turned to big on ecstasy. By the time I'm 14.
But at 10 years old, you're selling drugs and walk me through when you get arrested for the first time. Because to me, it's this fascinating experience where you're selling drugs, you said, to a confidential informant. Is he yo, are you 10? Right? Is it a shock to him how young you are?
It was another kid that had got busted by his parents. His parents called the cops, and the cops had this other kid set me up. For real. And so I'm in 5th grade. My parents just got divorced. The bank just foreclosed on the home that I grew up in. I'm living in an apartment building with my mom and visiting with my dad at the time. And I'm on the bus, and the bus pulls up to my apartment building, and there's like 4 cruisers out front, and one of them has the DARE, the drug program wrap on the car. And I get out. I remember getting out vividly off the bus and walking up with my backpack and be like, "Oh, somebody fucked up." You know what I mean? Like, why are these guys here? Like, what's going on? And I walk into my apartment, and there's like 5 cops, my weed, my scale and I'm like, "Oh shit,
yeah,
I'm pinched."
Okay. So from there, once you got arrested, I'm assuming they take you down to like the city or county jail or whatever. Like,
they actually didn't. I was so young that I don't think they knew it was such an unprecedented event that that they never actually put handcuffs on me. But I had to go to court, and I ended up getting a juvenile probation officer. I was on probation my entire childhood.
And was that an accelerant? Like the fact that there was, because I think a lot of people could be like, hey, law enforcement intervened. I'll put that in air quotes because whatever they want to call it, whether it's an arrest, whether it's probation, whatever. Oh, let's get them back on track. Or you almost like realize like, it's not that bad. Right. And then you basically just like, let me go do worse, bigger, badder things.
That's exactly what happened.
Okay. And so you go from weed to eventually you get to ecstasy, and now you're personally taking, you're not just selling, but you're using all kinds of pills.
The above.
Okay. And what are your friends doing? Are they into this stuff, or they just think you're like the crazy friend that everyone has?
I hung out. My friends were like other kind of kids from broken homes that had similar backgrounds, similar types of families, and they were, getting in a lot of trouble. One of my best friends, Frank, got arrested at 12 on a gun charge. Got caught with a .22 caliber pistol. We're fighting all the time. It's
a rough life.
It's a rough life.
All right.
Yep.
Now, how do you get from like 14, 15 to eventually being, 18, 20 years old, where I would consider society at least says like, hey, now you're a young adult, right?
Yep.
What is that path like? Are you just continuing to use all the way up through that?
I'll tell you about it.
Okay.
I'm selling drugs, using drugs, I'm in that lifestyle. And to put a mental picture to it, I'm 10 years old on like a Huffy bicycle, packing a BB gun with the Discman and the headphones, listening to like Dr. Dre, The Chronic, and Snoop Dogg, and like Tupac and Biggie. Like,
you're a gangster just with a BB gun rather than a real gun.
Yeah. Like in the suburbs. Yes. My dad's a logger. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Got it.
And so I don't know, as confusing as that is, but
how much impact did the music have? Because
a ton.
I don't know how old you are, but
the culture of
a
the
lot
music,
of that.
I talk about that all the time. I think the culture of the music, which today I talk about, like our diet and the things that we consume, the content we consume, the music we listen to, the books we read, the podcast, the people we allow into our inner circle, all of that is so exponentially influential. And so coming up in that gangster rap era, like that was cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
I think
that's what I emulated as a white kid in New Hampshire. Like,
yeah, but I think that was across the country. I mean, even my friends, like the more that we listened to it, the like more bad shit we did, right? And everyone's got kind of different severity in terms of what bad was for their area, their friend group, whatever. But I also think at the same time that the rap artists from the 1990s into the 2000s ended up being some of the best entrepreneurs of our lifetime as well,
100%.
right? And so in some way, kind of knowing that you ended up going and starting businesses and really understanding kind of the business and investing world, do you think in hindsight that your experience in your teenage years taught you a lot about entrepreneurship and the ability to sell things?
Yeah, mental toughness, perseverance, FIU muscles, figure it out. You know what I mean? You get yourself in a lot of jams on the street. And so you constantly survival, adaptation. Like,
what's the worst situation you got yourself in?
Oh God. I mean, there's so many, let me walk you through a little bit of, dude, I'm 14, 15 years old, and this is 1999, Oxycontin, pharmaceutical grade heroin being mismarketed by Purdue Pharma as a non-addictive painkiller. It's really heroin in a pill, is running rampant. kid that I grew up with down the street comes over with a 40 milligram pill. We sniff the thing. I do half, he does half. I get high in opiates, that drug class of like same thing as heroin for the first time. And I fall in love. Out of all the drugs I'd ever done, I was like, this is the one. Like, I'm like Superman on this shit, right? And 6 months later, I'm 15 years old. I stop going to high school. I drop out and I'm fully addicted to Oxycontin, and I'm in the process of moving from Oxycontin to heroin.
Okay.
And at 15 years old, in my 15th year, I finished it as a full-blown IV heroin addict.
Really?
Yeah. I dropped out of school, hardcore junkie, running the streets, like in a man's world.
And as somebody who, after surgeries, I've had to take some of these painkillers, right, in pill form. And I literally, I've told the story before, I took one of the pills and I was in college, and I went to class and I fell asleep. Like the shit, it didn't make me addicted. It just like, I couldn't operate on them, right? Crushing them and snorting them versus the actual just like IV heroin. What is the difference in terms of like how your body reacted? Was the heroin that much more addictive, or did you feel like it was actually pretty similar in terms of crushing and snorting versus
it's pretty similar. I think that it's just a different delivery system.
Okay.
And so crushing and snorting and takes longer for your body to get the euphoric effects, for it to filter through your system and for it to start to get in there. It also isn't as potent, so you have to do more.
Sounds like amateur hour compared to the IV.
Everyone that ends up there, if they stay in the game long enough, they end up IV, because what happens is you build a tolerance.
Got it.
And so I start off sniffing one bag of heroin and it gets me high as a kite. But in a pretty short period of time, I can sniff 20 of them.
Jesus.
And that's expensive. But then I'm watching other people, because now I'm in the world, and I'm watching these people, and they're IV users, and they're getting just as high off of 1 or 2 bags as I am 20, because they're shooting it.
And that's like a economic evaluation of like, I can spend less money and get more high.
And it's more intense. It's about the rush. An IV, when you use it and shoot it, it rushes you. It hits you in seconds. And so that becomes a part of the thrill as well. And
so you're 15, you're now full on heroin addict. Where are you living? Are you still living at home? My mom, I was such a badass little kid, and my mom, had her own issues, that after I spent 2 years with her from 10 to 12, she dropped me off at my dad's and pretty much disengaged from my life. Okay. And we weren't seeing eye to eye. And so now I'm staying with my dad. From maybe around 13 years old, I spent a year sleeping on a mattress in the corner of a bedroom that he had rented. He saves up some money. We're able to get a small, modest little ranch, 1-story house, and we move into that together. I take up the basement, cellar dweller, and kind of created my own little drug den world down there by the time I was 14. Does he know any of this is going on, or he just kind of doesn't want to really pay attention?
I think he kind of knows. He doesn't know. I'm constantly in trouble, right? Like, I'm constantly getting arrested. When I was in school, I'm getting suspended all the time. The people at the school know who and what I am. The police know who and what I am. But my dad is like a lot of parents, where he just wanted to see the best in me. And I think there's also this thing that people think, for young people like that, especially, that like it's a rite of passage or I'll outgrow it. I don't know that he knew the severity. Like, I knew that he probably knew that I drank alcohol and smoked pot. But you fast forward, I shoot heroin for the first time at 15. At 17 years old, I'm working with him. We're cutting trees down. It's a dog hot summer day in the middle of New Hampshire in July. I remember it like it was yesterday. And my dad had some heavy equipment that we would work with, and he had an excavator. He's running the excavator, and I'm on the chainsaw, notching and back cutting trees, taking down trees. And I'm dope sick. When you don't have heroin, you go into withdrawals. Wow. And so I'm sick. So I'm like, sweating. I got sawdust all over me. It's like, late morning, and I'm sneaking off and like puking in the woods. I mean, life is just miserable, and I'm tired, and I've been doing this for 2 years now, and I think that I'm done. And I remember just putting the saw down and walking up and jumping up on the track of the excavator and telling him, turn it off. And he kills it. And he's like, what's up? And I look him right in his face and I'm like, Dad, I need help.
Really?
Yeah. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm addicted to heroin.
And what was his reaction?
He was floored. His eyes were this big. I mean, as a parent, you have to imagine that's like the most terrifying fucking thing in the world. Your 17-year-old baby that you've done your best with. And he, he's a good dad and looks you in your face and tells you he's addicted to heroin. Yeah. I mean, you go around the world, heroin addicts don't exactly have a great recovery rate. Mm-hmm. And so we shut that down. We left the job site. We went back. At the time, we got on the phone book, went to the yellow pages, started calling through and found some professionals to help detox me off of heroin. Mm-hmm. And that was really my first solid attempt at trying to get sober.
And so it was almost like he may have known some bad stuff was going on. He didn't want to necessarily see it. And then when you said it to him, it almost sounds like you kind of smacked him in the face and said, hey, I need help.
He knew, there was no doubt in anyone's mind, my friends were criminals. Mm-hmm. We partied. Mm-hmm. We lived a fast life. We made money a fast way. Mm-hmm. I think he knew all that in a general, but he didn't know that I was like addicted to heroin. Mm-hmm. He probably thought I just partied too much and, didn't have a whole lot of regard for the law or a regular civilian lifestyle.
When you go to detox, what is that experience like, especially at 17?
That one was out. I've been to plenty of inpatients because I was 17 and a adolescent, a minor, that was outpatient. And so they actually gave me the drugs and sent me home with them. And
they just say, here's some drugs to take. This will help you get off. Here's a regimen to follow.
I had to go see them every day and check in, and they told me what to take. And, they oversaw the process. It took about a week. The problem that a lot of people get twisted with addiction is they think that addiction is really about heroin. And they think that the solution to addiction is sobriety. I thought that. My dad thought that. I'm on heroin. What's the very obvious answer?
Get off.
Get off heroin. You know what I mean? But the problem is, and this is what I suffered from the next 5 years almost. I would get off heroin. And I would get off all drugs and alcohol, and I would be so uncomfortable in life. I didn't know how to do anything.
Interesting.
I would be depressed, anxious, restless, irritable, discontent, full of fear, paralyzed.
Because you missed the drugs, or because you didn't know what else to do?
Because that's what addiction is. Mm-hmm. Because people totally miss the mark on what addiction is. Heroin and alcohol and other drugs are some of the best forms of treatment for the disease of addiction. The disease of addiction is an internal condition. Mm-hmm. You talk to any alcoholic or watch them and they're in a state of sobriety, and you watch them crack a bottle and go. You can hear a noise and watch a reaction. It's this. Mm-hmm. You don't need relief from life right now. Mm-hmm. Like you're having generally a good day, right?
Yeah, I'm here with you.
Exactly. What's better? But this guy, he can't stand. He's in unbearable psychic, mental, and spiritual pain until that alcohol hits him, until that bag of dope hits him. Mm-hmm. And so what would happen to me was I would intuitively, with well-intentioned people, get told, you have to give up heroin and give up drugs and alcohol. And I would. And I would just be a complete disaster. Mm-hmm. And so over any period of time, it would get worse, not better. And I would feel totally out of control emotionally and mentally. And then I would eventually use and drink again to gain emotional control and take over my emotions. And the heroin and the drugs allowed me to regulate my affect. Mm-hmm. And that's really addiction. And so to fast forward that, the solution starts in abstinence. It's a prerequisite to getting better from addiction. But you must be in some sort of recovery or personal development process that will bring about an internal transformation, a rearrangement of what's going on inside of you. And so that's eventually what happened. There's a lot of story between here and there.
Yeah. Well, how old were you when you eventually got sober?
I got sober. I was 21 years old. It was 2 months, almost 3 months before my 22nd birthday. Okay. December 7th of 2006.
How many times do you think you went in and out of any sort of rehab or detox?
I tried to generalize it in attempts to get sober. Times that I was like, this is it. I'm done. Fucking, I'm all in. 100 or more.
Really?
Constantly. I hated it.
So you knew that you were addicted and you wanted a solution, but you didn't kind of know what the actual like sustainable solution.
I struggled finding a solution for 5 years. I was constantly like trying to storm the castle and then just and getting high or drinking and going on another relapse.
And when you look back now, when you did get sober, what ultimately, like, that was the time that you got sober? Was it not necessarily just like get off of the drugs, get off the alcohol, but it was replaced by something?
Yeah, I'll talk about it. So the events of that day were very dramatic. At this time, you know, I'm 17, 18 years old. My dad tells me, you got to leave. I can't help you no more, right? I'm bad. I spend the next few years out on the street, living like an animal. December 6th, the last day I ever used drugs of 2006, there's a drug deal gone bad. I pull a kitchen knife. The other guy's trying to buy the drugs. I don't have any drugs. I'm dope sick. I'm desperate. And I rob him with a kitchen knife. And he essentially calls the police and doesn't tell him it was a drug deal, but reports me for armed robbery. They swarm the neighborhood. I hide all night. I robbed him for $82. That was my courageous.
So you needed drugs so bad, you were so addicted that you basically set up a fake drug deal.
Set up a fake drug deal
to rob him
for $82. That's what he had. I took him for $82. And I bought 4 bags of heroin with it, and I hid in a closet, and that was the last time I ever used drugs.
Okay.
And that was December 6th of 2006. The next morning, I woke up. Dude, I'm like 197 pounds right now. I was 135 pounds. I was emaciated. I was disowned by everybody that I know. I didn't have a friend left in the world. I'd run out of lies. I was tired. They say you have to hit rock bottom. If that's true, that's exactly where I was. I knew with a moment of clarity that I was dead or in prison if I didn't change now. And so I had been up in Portland, Maine for those 2 years of addiction. I took off from there, went down to New Hampshire, reconnected with my mother, who I hadn't really had a relationship with in some time, and she let me sleep on her couch for a couple weeks. And what changed for me there was I walked to 12-step meetings, and a group of unbelievable men that I will forever be grateful for. They were all like 20-something years older than me or more, that had been sober for considerable time, grabbed me up and sucked me in and started to teach me how to live.
So the cops never caught you for the armed robbery?
No. Yes and no. I ended up cleaning that up along with a bunch of other legal stuff when I was like a year and a half sober.
Got it. So it's one of these situations where like you knew it was so bad that it wasn't just the drugs and alcohol too, right? Like there was the legal stuff there. Like it was so much pressure. It almost to me feels like you're describing like the world is like closing in on you.
100%.
And you were like,
I had nowhere left to go.
It is going to catch me, right? It is going to engulf me if I do not go and do something different. And what is the 12 steps? Like what is that group?
Sure. It originated from Alcoholics Anonymous in 1935. Alcoholics Anonymous, a fellowship that has meetings around the world now of people that have found sobriety. And the origination of that group is that a New York stockbroker named Bill Wilson was struggling with alcoholism, and he was introduced to a religious movement called the Oxford Group.
Okay.
In the early 1900s. The Oxford Group was an interesting group where they broke off from the contemporary church, basically because they were more radical in kind of a born again transformational experience than a lot of the contemporary church. And in the Oxford Group, they had a 6-step program of spiritual action. And this guy, Bill Wilson, gets sober in that. He does this spiritual work. It is an inventory of your character defects, a confession to the congregation, restitution to everyone that you've ever harmed. It's prayer and meditation. It's turning your will over to, Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior. Hardcore Christian stuff. He gets sober in that. 6 months go by. He's trying to take this to other alcoholics to help them. Alcoholic number 2 gets sober in Akron, Ohio, from his help. That guy was Dr. Bob, a proctologist, a drunk alcoholic butt doctor in Akron, Ohio. And in that, that was the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Okay.
And they went on to take that program of action and develop AA specifically for alcoholics. And that just mushroomed and exploded globally to help alcoholics and drug addicts. And now there's more, I think there's like more than 215 12-step fellowships. There's like a 12-step fellowship for every problem you could have. Gambling Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as you're doing this, how important was it that the men who kind of took you under their wing and really helped you break the addiction, that they were older than you? Like, I think a lot of times there's this weird dynamic where if they'd been the same age as you, it may not have had the same impact as actually being older guys, or no?
No, I don't think so. I think that then the recovery movement wasn't as popular as it is now. We were at the infancy stages of the nation's opioid epidemic. Young people weren't going through the life cycle of opioid addiction and treatment and finding recovery like they have been for some time now. Now the recovery scene's filled with young people, helping other young people, and it's beautiful. But it just happened to be that at that time in that town, these guys were older than me. They were great mentors. They were tough as shit on me. I mean, they really were.
In what way?
They didn't spare my feelings at all. They loved me so much that they literally did not give a rat's ass about how I felt. They'd tell me exactly what they saw. They would tell me exactly what I need to do. They'd be like, you are a selfish, self-centered, dishonest son of a bitch, and you need to change, you know? And they were right. I was. It was the truth about me then.
Were you offended when they were honest?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you do when you were offended?
Nothing.
Nothing you probably could do.
I sat there and I was offended. You know?
It's fascinating because there's so many people today that are afraid of offending other people.
It's changed. That thing has changed the way treatment is delivered and recovery is delivered.
Explain.
It's what you're describing and how the world has changed about people being scared to offend other people. And now, you know, you're very limited in what you can say. Like, there's a lot of censorship. There's a lot of, you know, I don't know, lines in the sand. A lot of that around offending other people that now I think it's really hurt the efficacy of the recovery movement and treatment because they care about what people think. And they care about how they feel, and they care about offending them. And the problem is that people like me, by the millions that come into these systems, we have broken operating systems of how we think, how we feel. Like, it should be offended. That's a good thing. The very thing that we're offending is the very thing that we need to smash and disassemble and recreate. And so they end up walking on eggshells around people. It's become very difficult.
I recently read David Goggins' new book,
Love him.
Never Finished. And in it, he describes the situation where he came from a broken home, really bad, watched his father beat his mother. I mean, just everything that, you know, you hope that kids don't grow up in that childhood, basically, he experienced. And in the beginning of the book, he describes that he goes back to see his father after a number of years. And at one point, they go to a very late dinner. His father has like a skate rink, basically. And after it's closed up, they go to Denny's. And he said he's sitting there and his dad's drunk. And when his dad drank, that's when the bad shit came out. That's when the demons came out. And he basically says, I looked at this dude and I was about to whoop his ass. And he was just like, I was an adult now, right? And I wanted him to suffer the same way that I suffered, the same way my brother and my mother and all this stuff. And he says that there's something that changes. I think the way he describes it is the weather changed in the booth because his dad realized, oh, this dude ain't playing, right? Like, oh shit, this ain't a kid anymore, right?
Yeah.
And he just saw it in his eyes. And he said, basically, they finished dinner in silence. He drove him back. He grabbed his keys and he left. Never talked to his dad again. And there was something in there about he wasn't necessarily explicitly saying the truth or offending him or anything, but it's that still like speaking to the core of the person, right? And now in that situation, he just did with a look or whatever it was that he was describing. But also, I think what you're saying is like these men basically told you the truth, and the truth is incredibly powerful. It can be incredibly offensive, but actually, you described it as they loved me so much that they told me the truth.
Yeah.
right? They weren't doing it because they wanted to hurt your feelings or anything. They wanted you to get better. They wanted you to be a better person.
They cared about me getting better, and they cared about my recovery, and they cared about my life far more than they cared about how I felt.
Yeah, which is a powerful thing.
Super powerful.
And a pretty mature thing for them to be able to see that.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think the ability to offend people for the right reasons actually it only comes from a place of maturity, right? In some weird way. Like there's people who are arrogant assholes, right? And they just go around offending everyone and there's no rhyme or reason. And there shouldn't be any reason for doing that, nor should society basically tolerate that type of nonsense.
Yeah, one of the things that they would say frequently is that we carry the truth with love.
Interesting.
They would say the truth without love is cruelty, but we carry the truth with love.
I like that.
Yeah.
It makes sense, right?
Huge. Because what they did a really good job with me, and I was out of my fucking mind. Like, bro, I was a nightmare. Like, I'd been on the streets a long time. I'd been surrounded by violence. I'd been, as much as you can be in that life, I'd been in that life. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm sitting there staring at them, and they're like telling me the truth. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to stab them with that fucking pen. Mm-hmm. And like, that's where I was at in the early days. And like, they just courageously were able to hold that space with me, but they did something really magical in the beginning. Was they established rapport with me, and I knew in my heart how much they cared about me. Mm-hmm. And that's why I stayed. And that's why I kept coming back, was I was like, fuck, they're not trying to hurt me. Like they're, I know they care about me. It's like that saying that, how the hell does it go? That they won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. They did that very well with me.
Interesting.
And they spent time with me, and they picked me up, and they brought me to meetings, and they brought me to Denny's. And, they also got me very quickly. One of the things they did was got me involved in service work. Hey kid, go pick up the cigarette butts. I'm just here because I don't want to shoot heroin anymore. What do cigarette butts have to do with that? And it got me out of myself, and it got me started to acclimate me to a life of service. Mm-hmm.
If you had physically fought them, who would have won, you think? Were they physically bigger, stronger, tougher than you?
There was a smorgasbord, a really wide spread of people. I mean, one of these guys was an investment banker. Another one was an attorney. Another one had done 25 years in prison on a murder bid and got out, a long time ago. And like the slice of society that this thing affects is everybody. Mm-hmm. It's not isolated to the tough guys, the corporate guys, the whatever it is. And so,
do you think it was a sense of respect that you had for them? Like inherently,
I respected them heavily. I still do.
I think a lot about in high school. I wasn't the best behaved kid, and just
I can imagine.
Similar to you, they knew who I was, and they knew, all the nonsense I was pulling.
A lot of entrepreneurs have that in common, though, right?
Of course. And I remember I walked into a classroom, and one of the teachers said to us, he went through, this is what the class is about, this whatever. And he just said, we don't have behavior problems in here, or we don't have discipline problems in here. And he just said it. And I always thought to myself, like, was it because it was a adult male saying it? Was it because he just addressed it and he was just like I don't even have time for that shit, right?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I wasn't a single person. There was a lot of badass kids in this one class.
Yeah.
No problems, right? And I think about that because it's like, actually, if I'm honest with myself, I think we respected them, right? That there was a level of like, I don't want to do dumb shit, because then that's going to cause you to have to deal with the dumb shit. And then I'm going to feel bad because I actually respect you in some weird way. And so this sounds like a very similar thing where you're like,
absolutely.
Even if you could physically have beat them up or whatever, and like kind of brought the same street mentality to it, out of respect, you were like, oh, maybe they do have my best interest at heart. And so I'll go do what they're asking me to do.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fascinating. All right, so how do we get from you're going through this like detox process to eventually you actually start businesses and kind of figure out how to create solutions for other people?
One of the guys from recovery gives me a job in his call center. I start making a couple bucks. I get a $550 a month apartment in a not so great neighborhood. And I'm walking to work, and I'm walking to recovery meetings, and I'm hanging out on the recovery scene, and I'm actively doing this recovery process and doing the work that they're putting in front of me, and I'm changing. And I'm changing from the inside out. And I like, the more I do, the more I get, and the more I get, the more I like it. And I start to get excited about it.
You're addicted.
I'm addicted to it. And And part of that excitement was I wanted to tell everyone else about it. And so I lived in like the hood, right? And right on like the outskirts of the hood was this down and out state funded treatment center called Keystone Hall. And it was a rehab I never went to, but the place saved my life. And I used to walk I would get out of work and I would walk to the treatment center right through the hood, past the dope dealers, past all the bullshit, and head down, and I would get to the rehab, and I was so poor, I didn't have any money, they would feed me. And I would just volunteer all my time and I would spend it with their clients. And I would talk to them about recovery, and I'd tell them about my experience, and I'd tell them, you know, I've been here for X amount of months. I've been here for a year. It's working for me. And I would show them the work that I was shown, and I would start to take them through that process. And in that, I found what still to this day I know to be my God-given purpose on earth was to help other people just like me. And in that, everything that I'd been through since I was a little kid, to all the pain on the street, to all of it, it made it make sense, and it gave it a why. And it made it valuable, and it made it useful to other people. Mm-hmm. And in that, I fell in love with it. And so after a little while at the call center, I left. I went back, after I've been sober a few months, my dad starts talking to me again. I go back working for him, cutting down trees. I start saving money. I'm doing side jobs. I'm with the guys at that facility. I'm at the recovery meetings. I'm with the recovery people. And I save up some money. My dad believes in me at this point. And when I'm about a year and a half sober, we put our coins together and come up with about 50 grand. This is October of 2008.
Okay, this is you and your dad.
Not a great economical time, October 2008. I buy, with my dad's help, I buy a 3-family apartment building, bank-owned, foreclosed, vacant for 150 grand. And with this vision that I'm going to go and live here, and I'm going to put a couple beds in each bedroom of every apartment, and I'm going to get those guys who are in that 30-day rehab, when they leave, they're going to come here and live with me. And they're going to pay me to stay in this bed. It's called a sober house. And this was a sober house before, like I'd say sober house, you kind of know what that is. Mm-hmm. This is 2008. Like, this is not popular. The guys in recovery that I was telling I was going to do this, like, the fuck are you talking about?
So just so people understand, somebody is addicted to whatever the vice of choice is. They go to the actual treatment center, but they're only there for some time boxed amount. So 30 days, 60 days, whatever it
30
is.
30 days usually.
Okay, yeah. So 30 days. When they leave, the problem that you had identified was they're going to go right back into the environment.
They're going back to the environment that got them there in the first place. And so I saw a problem, entrepreneurship. I saw a problem, and I was like, well, fuck, I'm going to fix the problem. I'm going to give them a place to go.
Okay.
And then I provided structure. And so they would leave there and come with me. And I lived with them for 2 years. That's how the business started. It was me and a revolving door of 11 guys. And I did the recovery work with them. We cooked together. We went to meetings together. I took them into the jails. I took them into other facilities to do service work and help other people. We did everything together. And a lot of those guys from that early day, they're still sober now. That was a long time ago. But
what were the economics of it? What were they paying you? Like,
they pay me
a couple $100?
Like $700 a month.
$700 a month.
Yeah.
And then basically you were able to run this, and this is like your full-time job. Like, you're just.
No, I'm going to work. I'm still cutting down trees every day.
Really?
So I'm waking up with these guys, waking them all up. It's very spiritual based. And so we're sitting in a circle. We're doing prayer. We're doing meditation together early in the morning. We're reading, recovery literature, spiritual literature, whatever. And then they have jobs. Mm-hmm. And so they go to work. I go to work. After the work day ends, we all meet back. We're doing family style dinners together. We're every day was something different. We're going to a recovery meeting. We're going to speak to new people at this facility, a jail, whatever. And so, and there were rules, you know what I mean? You had to make your bed. There was just a curfew. There was a lot of structure to it.
Mm-hmm. And so as you're doing this, when do you go from, okay, I have this one facility to now I'm going to like turn this into a business?
So 2008, 2010, being a logger is a blood sport. It is a tough way to make a living. And
what's so tough about it?
You're outside all day long in New Hampshire. You get about 3 months of decent weather, and even that's hot. So you're cold, hot, in the snow. you're cutting trees down. It's just hard physical labor all day long. 5 a.m. wake up on the job site by 6:30, 6:45. The type of people that work those jobs can be a little rough. And so your employees are, problematic at times, but it's just always something, and I really loved what I was doing with that. And every day I'd wake up and be like, fuck, this sucks. You know what I mean? I got cut by chainsaws. I'm getting whipped by trees. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is terrible. And I wanted to open a second house. And so at that time I went to my dad, tough conversation, tough moment, his only son, his only child. And I go to him in his business, right? I'm the next generation, and told him, I said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. I need to go full time with this. And that's when I made the pivot. And so
did he want you to take over the logging business?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of pressure my whole life. Like since I was a little kid, he was like, when you get up and run this business and, that type of thing. And so it put a lot of pressure on having the courage to have that conversation with my dad of like, nah, I want to do my own thing. I want to be my own guy. Were you
scared to have it with him?
Terrified.
Yeah. What was his reaction?
Solemn. He heard me. He probably saw it coming. I was so passionate about what I was doing, and I was good at it. And so I opened a second one, and then I opened a bigger one.
And how are you financing those?
Dude, you know what's crazy? This is one of my sticks about a lot of entrepreneurs today coming out of this economy that we've been in about investors and loans and debt and blah, blah, blah. Bro, if people could time travel back to 2008, 9, 10, even 11, you could walk into a bank and be like, can I finance this bottle of water? And they'd be like, are you fucking okay? Like, do you know what's going on outside? Get out of my bag. Like, you couldn't get a loan for anything, right?
Yeah.
And so I bootstrapped that business from that initial seed money to buy that first building until I sold it in December of 2021. And I never took a single dollar of investment money for growth. And I never took a single dollar of a loan or debt into the business. My waterfall didn't have debt to pay down at the transaction, right? And the company size at that time, we were doing, a little more than $50 million top line revenue, 325 employees. It was real business. And so what I did was this really old fashioned thing that's not very popular is called I worked hard and I spent less. You know what I mean? It takes fucking discipline though. When you have money in the bank and you're still buying cheap food and driving a shitty car and like not living in a crap place, that's the discipline of like the entrepreneurship. Mine was driven by the economy, which I'm grateful for. But that's what I did.
So as you're doing this, what did you kind of learn, right, in terms of scaling this business? Because 300 employees is no joke. Also, when you start getting into tens of millions of dollars of revenue, that's real responsibility and it's real risk because now you could like really screw things up, right? You can get yourself in trouble pretty quickly. You make a couple of bad decisions. You buy a piece of real estate that goes underwater. All these different things that start to happen. What would you say was like the one or two things you did? Because you had what I'll call like the street education. But that's big business now. Now you're in a game of like, you don't just, wake up one day and like, oh, I know how to do real estate transactions, right? You don't wake up one day and like, oh, I know how to manage 300 people, right? Sure, you may know how to sell drugs on the street, but that's a different skill set. It may be a related skill set, but it's different. Was there one or two things you did that you really credit to like being able to transition from just a pure street education, actually being able to run a business like this?
Yeah, I'm a 15-year-old dropout that still doesn't have a GED. But what I do have is an unbelievably developed ability to learn. I'm a sponge. And so that's what I did. I just kept it glass half empty the whole time and was constantly in this obsessive pursuit of learning from people, learning from books, learning from anything and everywhere that I could find information on teaching myself things.
Yeah. How many of the businesses in the recovery space are run by previous addicts? Is that a lot? A lot of them?
A lot. Yeah.
So like, I'm assuming that has a huge piece in you being able to understand the problem really, really well and actually design what seems to be one of the more cutting edge programs to actually be able to help people. Because I think like the outcome here is not just like, hey, we're collecting rent, right? The outcome is actually like, no, we are helping people improve their lives, stay sober, and kind of become highly functioning, productive members of society, right?
Yeah.
And so like when you think about selling the business, why'd you sell it?
From opening day till transaction day was 13 years, 2 months. And, I started when I was 23 years old, and I think I was 35, right? 35 when I sold it. And everything just has a life cycle. I was in New Hampshire. I didn't want to be there anymore. It was I love it. I still love it. I'm back in it, a little more than a year later, here we are. And, but it was just a tough business to be in. It was emotionally, there's a lot that happened there. I poured everything that I had into that every single day. I had all my eggs in one basket, which is high risk. And I was surrounded by death, people dying. Fentanyl happened. Fentanyl started coming into America about 2012, 2013.
What's going on with that stuff? Because that seems like the second coming of the opioid crisis. Like it was opioids, and then it was fentanyl.
There hasn't been a real bag of heroin on the streets in America in years.
What does that mean?
Heroin isn't, there's no heroin addicts anymore. They don't sell heroin. They sell fentanyl. Fentanyl is randomly 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. Prior to fentanyl showing up in the country, overdose death is like not that common. You don't it's a once in a great while that, and it's normally through a mixture of other drugs and stuff. Fentanyl shows up and it just starts killing people.
Really?
And yeah. And so, I look back and it's funny. You asked me a question earlier and you're like, what was the worst thing you've ever been through? If you isolate that to active addiction, I could answer it. If you put it in my lifespan, it's fentanyl. And not that it affected me directly from using it. I've never actually used it. I've been sober too long, but it killed hundreds of my friends, thousands of my clients. The amount of death that I was surrounded by really honestly fucked me up. And so, there was 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, I'm showing up to 1, 2, 3 funerals a week.
Really?
Bro, I've consoled hundreds of grieving parents, if not close to 1,000.
Yeah.
There's only so many moms burying their 20-something-year-old crying through your shirt that before it's fuck, it took a piece of me. And so there was just all this complexity of it. I was tired. There was a business sense. There was emotional. There was just time for the next chapter. I've been doing this a long time. And so it all came to a perfect storm. And I had been ready. I actually transacted 4 times.
Okay.
And so I sold minority on 3 different bites to a family office. At a scaling valuation, and then myself to the same family office, and then to take chips off the table and mitigate risk and have money, off to the side. And then myself and that family office divested out of it and had a full sale when I sold in December of 21. And I was still majority owner at that point.
As you're talking to the family offices or whoever ended up purchasing the business, how much of who they're talking to is you, the business person, versus you, the guy from the street?
The guy here's the funny thing about recovery and the life experience is I sit here and openly, with however many people are going to watch this, talk about all this stuff that most people would probably have a lot of shame about, would have a lot of regret, would, be embarrassed and not willingly just put out there. But through the process that I've been through, we say that we die the death of self here. And so that guy's dead. I go to bed at 10 p.m. I'm up at 5. I'm a dad to 2 boys. I take care of my senior dad. He lives with me up north. I haven't been a street guy in a very long time.
Yeah.
And so, I'm Eric, the business guy, it's still there, of course, but I'm Eric, the business guy, Eric, the family guy, Eric, the friend, Eric, the guy that, has morals and values, and anything that had ever happened back in the day has been unthinkable for me for a very long time. I don't think I could even bring myself to do it because that operating system has just been gone for a very long time.
Yeah. One of the most impressive parts of the business that you built is you really built 2 businesses, right? So you've got the what I call the operating business, where you're actually servicing these clients. You're able to get them into a better position in life and kind of make them those productive citizens. But there's also a real estate component to it. Talk a little bit about the strategy as you built the company and kind of why you had the 2 different sides.
You know what's funny is a lot of it I learned as I went, but I owned the real estate in the first sober house. I like owning real estate. I believe heavily in real estate as an asset class. It's my most preferred asset class. I still own a lot of real estate. And so as I was growing, I was purchasing the real estate and fitting up the facilities, Eric, the landlord in the real estate holding company, and then leasing them back to the operating company and starting these de novo startups, in those physical plants. Mm-hmm. And so I did that through, probably, I don't know, close to 20 sites.
Wow.
Varying sizes, mm-hmm. right? Big, small, medium, but
mm-hmm.
Yep.
And why just stay in the recovery space? Obviously, there's a whole bunch of different things in healthcare that you could have gone into, right? But you stayed in recovery just because you knew it and then you cared about it, or was there other reasons?
It's, to what you recently asked me about Eric the street guy, it's Eric the recovery guy is different than that. And so it's my labor of love. It's my passion. And so I'm not a guy in recovery for an eating disorder or autism or a significant mental health disorder. I am a man in long-term recovery from addiction and alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, what I've been passionate about for a long time and what I know best.
Yeah. Your entire story has this emotional component to it, but also if you can kind of separate out the emotional part and you look at it from a business perspective, what is unique is that you were able to learn a number of the things that you needed, but also you had great market timing, although you probably didn't know you were going to have market timing.
No, I actually did. I almost started to say that when you asked me why I sold. And so I apologize. After I checked all those boxes and I had divested those 3 times, in March of 2021, I was tired and I was all of those things, but I was also looking around in the world and going, we're at the top.
So forget about the sale. I was actually talking about in the beginning. Because
the headwinds of the addiction, a lot of it was timing, for sure.
Because there was immense explosion of drug addiction, but also there was the incoming insurance coverage of addiction. So talk a little bit about, yes, we know that the drug problem got very bad, kind of 2010 and beyond, but also talk a little bit about the ability to switch from individuals themselves having to pay to the insurance companies now being obligated to cover the addiction treatments.
So Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare comes out. And prior to that, health insurance policies were not required to cover substance use disorder, addiction treatment, or mental health treatment as a required benefit. And they had this section of those policies that was affected by a parity law. Excuse me one sec. And parity essentially said that we need to stop treating addiction and mental health disorders like they're the little, annoying cousin of healthcare. Mm-hmm. That these are real diseases. They need to be treated and covered like real diseases, no different than diabetes. And so that law came out and it required insurance companies to provide a benefit for addiction treatment. And that's when the industry started to explode. And I just happened to be in a good position because I'd already been there. Mm-hmm. Like I'd been in the sober living since 2008. That was 2011, 12. I was already growing. And so that happened. And then another significant thing was the 2016 campaign. That was essentially run on addiction as a main issue. Like Donald Trump, local politicians, really highlighted addiction and overdose death and those things as a very important issue of their campaign. Mm-hmm. I mean, my home state, Donald Trump called New Hampshire's a drug-infested den. Beautiful place, but drug-infested den.
Wow.
And so I'm in New Hampshire, first in the primary. Politicians are ramping up and the presidential races, they start coming through 18 months ahead of time, 2 years ahead of time. They're already starting to, trickle in up there.
Making sure that they got a good message.
Yeah. And then, the local politician, the governor and all that, all those races. And so at that time I get really a lot of tailwinds through that. And I kind of get inducted into this political scene. I testified to the United States Senate in 2015 on the opioid epidemic. I'm meeting presidential candidates that are coming through New Hampshire front and center.
Are you surprised? Like, do you ever like pinch yourself and like, I can't believe I'm testifying right now?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, like if they had only seen me then, right?
Well, what's funny is I walk into, this building in Washington, D.C. with United States senators to give this 3 hours of testimony and Q&A with them on the issue. And here I am looking, Lamar Alexander, the oldest sitting Republican senator from Tennessee, and answering his questions and telling him about how I used to sell drugs and rob people and do heroin. And I'm just like, what is my life? You know what I mean? How did I get here?
I can imagine that is one of those moments where you're like, it's cool, but also shocking. If you'd only told your younger self, like one day you'll testify in front of senators about this.
Yeah. I mean, and that's been true of a lot of my life. You know what I mean? Like people oftentimes are, when they learn my story or they kind of get a gist of it, they're taken back and shocked and have questions. And I'm like, I don't know.
Figured it out.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how I got here either. So I'm as confused as you know?
At what point did you start really like leaning into Instagram? Because I think part of what's fascinating, you got this like great story, right? And kind of you've overcome so much adversity. And I think you're a couple years older than me. I got a cell phone in high school. I think it was the first cell phone I ever got. There's a lot of young kids who they understand how to use this stuff better than, you and I understand pretty good how to use it. Yeah. But there's like 18-year-old kids running around right now. They literally don't remember a life before a cell phone. Right.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so like, at what point were you like, you know what, I need to get on the internet? I need to like go build a personal brand.
I remember it. It's probably 2019, 2020-ish, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And, I have an Instagram. I probably have about like 2,000 followers. Mm-hmm. I got pictures.
Like a normal person.
I'm like a normal guy on Instagram. I got
with a couple of friends.
Yeah. I got pictures of my dog. I got pictures of my kid. I got normal shit on there. Yeah. And someone sends me a clip from this guy, Gary Vaynerchuk. Mm-hmm. And at the time, Gary was like going hard in content on build a personal brand, attention. And like, that was his stick at the time. And I start watching it and I'm like, he's right. This guy is right. And this could really help a lot of people. This could help bring attention. And mind you, I was also primed. I've been being covered by the media since 2008. Mm-hmm. I'm hanging out with politicians. I'm talking to people in Trump's administration. Me and the governor are frequently meeting and talking. Like, I'm in the paper. I'm on the news. I'm getting called into this, called into that. Like, I have attention, real world attention, not social media attention. So I just had this thought. I'm like, it's kind of all made it here. And so he was doing this thing called 4Ds, where you pay and you go down to New York to Hudson Yards, and there's 10 of you, and you sit in his office and meet a bunch of his team and spend time with him and learn about social media marketing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. I knew nothing about any of it. And so somewhere around that time period, I went down to Gary Vaynerchuk's office, met him for the first time, and came out of that. And I was like, this is something I need to do.
Yeah. You remember how much he was charging?
10 grand a head.
Yeah, so it's expensive, but it's not completely out of the realm for people who have
worth
a business or whatever.
And worth
good
it.
Investment.
I would do it again. Yeah.
And when you're sitting in that room, like, at what point are you like, this could help me with my business? Is it they could help me personally? Like what's going through your head as to like why you're like, yeah, I got to do this?
It started to come into focus for me about how attention was a commodity. Mm-hmm. And how that could just have general uplift to anything that I do. Mm-hmm. And that a personal brand and being known out there and telling your story and being the first and having eyeballs and all of that can be beneficial to whatever, Mm-hmm. Like I get messages every single day of people that I've never met, I probably never will meet. I got one this morning, guy told me quit drinking 3 weeks ago and I'm his inspiration. Mm-hmm. If I can do that by posting on my story and putting out some content and have a positive impact, I mean, that in itself makes it worth it, let alone business opportunities, drawing attention to whatever it is that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So it's really worked out for me. It's also helped me network and socialize with mm-hmm. amazing people. That's how I met you.
Yeah, that is how we met. This morning you hit your snooze button a couple times. I saw you said, and I think it's important, like, you have overcome so much. You are so disciplined. You have been able to stay sober for so long, but like Now, hitting the snooze button a couple times is not, going and doing heroin again.
That's right. Yeah.
But there are these like kind of self-correcting mechanisms. And you were talking about like, look, there's like a discipline component to it. Mm-hmm. How do you think about your life and the structure of it now? Especially like, it almost seems to some degree you got sober, you had a business, you focused on that business for, 12, 13 years. When you sell the business, you're not going to work anymore. Dude, right. And you're trying to figure out like what else to do. Like talk a little bit about that change.
Here's what actually happened. I'll be raw and real. I fell apart.
Really?
Dude, well, I'm up in New Hampshire, restaurants close at 8:30, mm-hmm. They roll the sidewalks up and I sell my business and I have more money than I've ever even seen in my life. And I buy a house down here in Miami and I'm down here and I got no reason to wake up. Mm-hmm. I have nowhere to be. I'm not worried about making payroll. I'm not worried about sales. I'm worried about nothing, like literally. And I ended up staying up late and I ended up being out too much. I mean, in Miami, dinner oftentimes starts at 11, 12 o'clock at night. That's when the reservation's for, you know what I mean? And so now I'm sleeping in and I had been disciplined my entire journey in recovery. I've been incredibly disciplined. And it was just now that this, being out of the business, relocating and spending a lot of time down here. And, I put on weight. I just hit this thing and I was like, I'm fucking miserable. The outside world looking at me should be, I bought a jet, I bought a yacht, I bought a killer house in Miami, I bought a Rolls Royce truck, I'm like,
how much shit, hold on, back up. How much shit did you buy? So you bought a jet, a boat, a Rolls Royce truck, and a house? Is that it? Or you got more shit?
I'm sure I got more shit, but that's the big stuff. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I can go anywhere I want and do anything I want. And, and I'm not fucking happy.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. And it just hit me and I was like, it was one of the most profound life lessons that I've been through in more modern times, of course, was like, I'm a guy that I don't give a fuck if you gave me $1 billion right now, I'd be up at 5 a.m. tomorrow. I got to get up and make the donuts every day. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. I'm a grinder. I love the process. I love doing, I love building. I love the discipline. I love the structure. That's also what I talked about on my story this morning was like, why do we do things? For the effect produced. And the analysis is, you drink because you like how that feels. You do drugs because you like how that feels. But you also have to tie that to, do you like the result? And so I live a very structured, disciplined life. I'm up at 5 a.m. I get an early morning, for me, it's prayer, it's meditation, it's reading, it's, contemplation, it's manifestation. And I'm normally out the door for the gym by like 5:45-ish. And I get my workout in. The world is quiet. My phone is quiet. And I get my workout in. I come back, I shower. I eat my first meal for the day. Diet, very important. And by like about 7:30 in the morning, like I'm ready for the world. Mm-hmm. And like
some of them haven't even woken up yet.
I beat them. I fuck with them all the time. I'm like, I'm so much richer than you. How the fuck am I up earlier than you are?
But there is a mentality. It's like one of the things my wife and I talk a lot about is like, there's the easy life and then there's like a hard life.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are grinding their asses off to get to the easy life. And so many of our friends have been fortunate to get some version of that. Some of them more so than others or whatever. But once they get a taste of the easy life, there's a fork in the road. Some of them double, triple, quadruple down on the easy life. Yeah. Next thing you know, they're like, I'm retired, I'm chilling, whatever. I want the easiest cake job possible, whatever. And some of them are like, yo, I miss the hard life. I need the difficulty. I need the edge. I need the things that keep me going.
Do you know that my investment banker and my M&A legal team and my tax advisors and all this group of like insanely expensive advisory group that surrounded me through these processes were like, you're going to miss this. And I was like, I don't really think I am. Like, I don't know about that. You give me $100 million and like, I'm going to be just fine. Don't you worry about me. Yeah. And they were right. You know what I mean? Like the discipline, the grind, the stress, the hunt, the kill, the build, the camaraderie, the team, the mission, all of it. And now, I'm happy. I'm back in it. I'm back in it. I got problems all day long, and I'm grateful for them.
Yeah. What are your goals now?
You really want to know?
Yeah.
I don't want this to come off the wrong way, and I need to explain the why behind it for people for me to feel understood. But I'm working on a net worth of $1 billion.
Okay. I don't think that's a crazy idea.
I don't think it's a crazy idea either, right? It's a small club. Not because I just told you I have a plane, I have a jet, I have a boat, I have a house. Like I have if I had more money, I don't even know what I would do with it, to be frank with you. So it's not for that, right? And I already told you, I got to get up in the morning. It's not going to change my life. I'm not going to do anything differently because I am a fully tattooed former criminal, drug addict, 15-year-old, 10th grade dropout without a fucking GED. And I want to be the first one to do that. And not for me, because I want to show them it can be done. Mm-hmm. If I can get there, what can you do? Mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. If I can achieve this, if I hit that goal over the next 15, 20 years, then what's possible for the rest of you?
Mm-hmm. And frankly, I don't want to say it's going to become easier over time, but they're going to have more tools that they can leverage, right?
People underestimate that. You know, guys in our age bracket, like we had it a lot harder in the early days of entrepreneurship. I started my business. I didn't even have a MySpace. Think about that. Yeah. The internet was not the internet. You still went to the library and checked out books and read them. Mm-hmm. You know, you went and sat in the seats at Barnes & Noble if you couldn't afford them and read them and put them back. Mm-hmm. And so access to information, access to creating businesses and opportunity it's insane these days.
Yeah. I think a lot about like the new technology solves problems that other people previously had, but it creates new problems as well, right? So one of the things that's fascinating to me about your story is you're dealing with these addictions that in 2005, let's say, many people, especially the insurance companies, did not look at drug addiction or others as these healthcare problems. They looked at it maybe in other ways they didn't want to cover or what have you. Today, I actually think of digital addiction as similar to what 2005 was for drug or alcoholism, right? And one of the things that last year, I've told a story before, somebody handed me a physical book and I tried to read and I couldn't read it. and not because I can't read, I thankfully had a good enough education to read. I couldn't concentrate. I could not sit with the physical book and not reach for my phone every 30 seconds. Yep. And I was like, this is bad. And so I told a friend that kind of offhand comment at dinner one night and he goes, get your phone out. All right. He goes, look to see how many times your phone lights up. And so on an iPhone, you can see how many notifications and stuff. 750 something notifications every single day. And I just looked at him and he's like, dude, literally every time that thing lights up, he goes, whether you realize it or not, if you see it out of the corner of your eye, if it's sitting next to your desk while you're working or reading or whatever, he's like, you're looking. Right. And he was like, and so shut that shit off.
If you're as busy as us, if it doesn't go off for 20 minutes, you're like, what the fuck is wrong with this thing?
Did something in the world happen, right?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is like, yes, the internet and social media and all these things, they solve all these problems. And it's amazing. And it provide all these different things. But now let's introduce new problems where now I look and I see a lot of these young founders. Dude, they spend more time on fucking Twitter or Instagram than they do building their business.
We've seen it in the patient population in treatment of how they've changed so much. So I have a couple things that I really want to tell you about.
Okay.
One is information that most people should know if they're concerned with addiction. It fucking blew my mind. A lot of how we think about addiction is based out of this early experiment in the 80s and the early 90s where they took a lab science box and they put a rat in it. It's like a little rat cage. And they put 2 bottles of drinking water and they had regular water and then they had drug-infused water. They ran the experiment with heroin and they ran the experiment with cocaine. In that experiment, what happens is the rat tries both. He feels the euphoric effects of the drugs. He goes back to the drugs. He continues to use the drugs. He becomes physically addicted. And almost most of those rats end up overdosing and dying. Mm-hmm. That is in psychology textbooks for people that are healthcare and mental health providers, and for doctors and nurses and folks, they don't give a lot of education on addiction. And so the philosophy out of that is drugs are bad. They have chemical hooks. If you do drugs, that they're going to get you and you're going to become this addicted rat. Out of that philosophy is also the prohibition mindset, the war on drugs. We have to eradicate the problem, we eradicate the substance. Follow? This guy, a social scientist up in Vancouver, Canada, he's an old man now. His name's Bruce Alexander. He wrote a book called The Globalization of Addiction. It's unbelievable. And he ties addiction to economy and Western civilization. And he comes around and says, well, wait a minute. We've isolated the rat. And he starts an experiment called Rat Park. And he builds a rat cage that's 10 feet long and 8 feet wide or some shit. It's huge. And he puts wood chips and aluminum cans and, wheels and rat food and, shiny shit and toys and tunnels. And he puts a bunch of rats in there. Male rats, female rats, they're having sex, they're rat pups. They're doing what they're meant to be doing in the best possible environment that a rat could want to live in. I was going to say,
it sounds like an awesome
rat life. Sounds fucking awesome, yeah. And
my guy built him tunnels.
Listen, he comes in and he introduces drinking water and he introduces heroin water. The rats, out of curiosity, try both. They watch over time. The rats favor the drinking water and they occasionally use the drugged water and get intoxicated because rats like to party every once in a while. No rats become physically addicted to the heroin, unlike every rat in the isolated box.
Wow.
Not only that, he takes isolated rats, he gets them addicted to heroin, and then he removes them and he puts them into Rat Park. Now, modern day Western civilization thinking and philosophy around drugs is in Rat Park. If the drugs are available, we got to eradicate them. All these rats are going to become junkies. It also will tell us, most people would jump to a conclusion that this physically addicted addict junkie rat entering a productive, healthy rat society is going to, with access to drugs, is going to be a menace to society and continue to use the drugs. The rat is aware there's drinking water and there's drugged water. It is physically addicted to opiates. It is going to experience painful withdrawal symptoms if it does not use that drugs, and it knows it, and it knows it's available. It kicks the habit almost every time. How? No rats become addicted and no rats overdose and die in Rat Park. Because what the one context of the study of addiction and the treatment of addiction and solutions for this is that has been evaded entirely is environment. Because if we look at environment, all of a sudden we have to take fucking responsibility. It's genetics, it's trauma, it's, the substance, it's the bad neighborhood. It's all of these things that we place the blame on. So out of this, he births this thing called the dislocation theory of addiction. And essentially, if you look at slices of generations over time, I think everyone would agree that society from addiction and mental health standpoint is getting worse generation over generation in decade blocks, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2020s. Like, we're fucking worse now than we were 10 years ago. 10 years ago was worse than it was 10 years before that. What's happening? Our society is becoming more and more dislocated. Digital devices are enormous. And so when you think about what a human being is, what are we? Strip away all this bullshit. We're a pack, tribal, mental animal. And so we have a basic necessity for human connection, for bonds. We need a life that has hope. And so all of these things in the way that we're living and continue to live, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, has continued to create an elevated stress response on human beings that Bruce Alexander would describe substance use problems as a maladaptive response to an overwhelming stress condition. It's phenomenally interesting. You know why it doesn't blow up?
Why?
How does pharma make money on that? How do you profit on that? You have to disassemble things. There's no way to make money. Follow? And so when you look at the magic of the recovery community essentially, you look at what I learned this and it like blew my mind. And I was like, I got sober and I met these men and like, they became my tribe. They became my Rat Park. They were the fucking connections. They were the people. You look at so many of these different things that about the world that we live in. The middle class, you know, you're a Democrat and you think it's the fucking rich people's fault, or you're rich people, you think they take all our money, whatever it is. But the fact is the hope of a young person today is getting less and less. My grandfather in 1952 bought a modest, small, single-story home on 2 acres of land. And he had a wife that was a stay-at-home mom, and he raised 3 boys. He was a steel worker in a mill. He owned 2 acres of land and a home and had a stay-at-home wife. You can't even be a fucking construction worker and have an apartment, let alone have a girlfriend. You got to feed her, you know? And so growing up in this environment, it's just tougher and tougher and tougher for people. The future is bleak for them. You think about in the game of life, what we're told, okay, we grow up, we're either have or have not. If you're not wildly successful, you're going to get a job. You're going to go there for 40, 45 years. You're going to, you know, hopefully get a job, then get a better job, and then get a better job. Most of your money is going to pay your bills. You're going to have a fucking life that you can't stand so much that hopefully you get 2, 3, 4 weeks of vacation and can afford to get on a plane and go somewhere nice as the highlight reel to your existence. And then at the end of that, what happens? You get a fucking retirement and a pension. You get fixed income. And what do we do to our elderly? We're all facing that road. If you live long enough, like, you're going to end up with some kids that fucking visit you in some facility playing chess with some other asshole. And like, it's just the future for most people is not bright. And so when you think about that, like, of course they're using fucking drugs. Of course it's getting worse.
When you talk about environment, what it immediately makes me think of is the book Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. He talks specifically about old age, death. And one of the assisted living centers realized if we put live plants, not fake plants, not no plants, actual real living plants around the center in people's rooms, they live longer. They're happier. They have a kind of a better quality of life.
Yep.
If you surround people with life, they end up actually thriving.
Absolutely.
And it's so fascinating because it also parlays perfectly into James Clear's entire idea of, like, if you change your identity, it changes your habits. So if you tell people, I don't drink, you're not going to drink, right? But if you just say, oh, you know what, I'm going to have the personal will to just say, nah, I'm good on the drink tonight, right? You have to actually start to identify it, right? Yep. I'm somebody who goes to the gym. Now you start to go to the gym, right? Like, if you can make it your identity, and to your point, if you're part of the recovery community, right? If you're one of the rats in that park and you're like, no, this is what we do, then you're good. Even if you do like to party every once in a while, you're still able to, majority of the time, stay where you need to be. It's pretty powerful.
The problem, it is very powerful. And when you think about the problem, the frustrating thing that has been a problem that's been persevering in front of me that bothers me is, we've figured out, for the ones that make it out, that are able to ask for help, we know how to get them well. You call me tomorrow and say, someone I care about has addiction or alcoholism, I have a solution for you. I know how to help them. They have to do the work, but they can get better and recover. What nothing is being done about is disassembling the machine that's creating them. And so, you know, which is getting worse day over day, year over year. You know,
when you look back at the last 20 years of your life, what's the biggest surprise to you?
Honestly,
I
can't believe I'm still alive.
Really?
Yeah. When I was 15 years old, I used to, like, openly talk about, like, I'm probably not going to live past, like, 21. And I used to live like that. You know, 5 overdoses on life support. I've been stabbed a couple times. I had my head split open by a crowbar. I've walked away from.
Back up. Hold on a second. You overdosed 5 times?
Yeah.
What is that experience like?
First time I thought I got abducted by aliens. I did, yeah. You know, I'm in the back seat of a car with some, you know, some homeless couple driving around, and I just copped a bunch of heroin for everyone. And, you know, I mix the stuff up in a needle and I shoot the stuff up in a car, and that's all I know. And then I come to, and I got these big, you know, square hospital lights above me, and I'm on a cold gurney and you know, masks and lights and everything. And it was really confusing waking up to that. Yeah.
Does it get easier? Like by the third, fourth, fifth one, do you like know what's happening, or is it still kind of?
By the third, fourth, fifth one, I'm so fucking miserable in my life that I wake up and I'm pissed off that they fucking brought me back.
Wow.
I'm like, fuck. This would have been just fine. You know, I would have been fine and, you know, checking out today. I would have been all right.
How'd you get stabbed?
Running around the hood, doing drugs, selling drugs, getting in beefs with people, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, and this is a weird question, but one of the things about whether it's projects or certain communities, did you ever get stabbed by someone and then friends with them afterwards? Or was it, nah, fuck you, you stabbed me and don't let me see you in the street? Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
You know, but here's an interesting thing to your point. Nobody that stabbed me, because I didn't really know those people all that well. We didn't even speak the same language, so we didn't communicate very well. And I, you know, I look back, I take responsibility. I was in a neighborhood that I shouldn't have been in, doing shit that I shouldn't have been doing, and trying to get away with things in a game that I shouldn't have been trying to get away with. And so, like, I knew
increasing the odds.
I knew the risks. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was like, I might get stabbed, but fuck it. You know,
you weren't walking down Park Avenue.
Part of getting better. This is. I don't know if you asked me this question, but I feel like you asked me something like this. The most powerful experience, or the one thing that I attribute my transformational experience to, is this one part of the process.
Okay.
And there's a lot of work you have to do to get to it, to get you ready for it, and have a shift in thinking and a shift in feeling and emotions and thoughts. But it's this process that they call amends. And so I sat down with these men, and they were like, Eric, if you want to obtain lifelong sobriety, and if you want to have this transformational experience, you need to do what we did. And we went through this process of amends. And what that was I made a list of everyone that I had ever harmed, ever. I didn't get to judge how big or small the harm was. If it was a yes or no question, did you harm them? Yes or no? Yes, they go on the list. And then the rules were that if I could make an amend to them, as long as it didn't hurt them or someone else, I had to make it. Personal consequence meant nothing. I had to put myself in harm's way to accomplish this. And then how you made it was also very structured, and they were very disciplined about this. You never say you're sorry. Your whole fucking life you've been sorry. If people applied what you did to the word sorry, all sorry would mean was, fuck, I got caught, I'm gonna do it again. So we don't say sorry in this process. People think it's like you go around apologizing. We don't apologize. You might express regret. And so what we would do is I would go in these different situations of people and places, and I would say, you know, I'm a drug addict, Pomp, and I harmed you. And how I've identified that I've harmed you is I stole from you, I assaulted you, I cheated on you, I whatever. And I'm willing to do absolutely anything I can to make that right. What can I do to make that? Did I leave anything out? Is there anything that I've harmed you with that I'm unaware of? And you shut up and you let them talk. Sometimes they're like, no. Sometimes 2 hours of them berating you goes by. And then the next question is, what can I do to make this right? And whatever they tell you to do, you do. There were 300 people almost on my list. I made amends to people that I was involved in violence with. I made amends to stores that I robbed. I made amends. I mean, if you can think of it, I went and cleaned up all of it.
What's the craziest thing someone asked you to do?
Say that again?
What's the craziest thing someone asked you to do to make amends to them?
Oh, God. I was talking about this the other day. I used to steal from Walmart. I treated that place like a personal ATM, right? And
Sam Walton wasn't happy with you.
No, he's pissed. And so I went into the Walmart and I asked to speak to the manager, and And I waited around, and the manager came up. I went through my spiel. I said, my name's Eric. I'm a drug addict. If you don't know them, you say, I'm on a life and death mission of recovery. My life depends upon being here today. I've wronged your store. How I wronged your store was I stole from here. By the best count, I probably stole 57 flat screen TVs, 100 or more fucking electric toothbrushes, Infamil dude, we used to run in there and when flat screens actually cost something back then, we'd stack up the flat rollaway and roll it through the front door, and we would know loss prevention was going to come. And sometimes we'd be sneaky and get away with the shit, but sometimes they'd roll out and they'd always say the same shit. You know what they say when you're stealing?
What?
Excuse me, sir. That's what we called it. You get excuse me, sir. And they go, excuse me, sir. And we'd be like, back the fuck up. I'm fucking, and just act crazy. And they'd be like, oh, I make $17 an hour. Take it.
Yeah. And don't have a gun.
Yeah, exactly. And so I tell the manager this, and this is a longer version than the story I told the other day. This is what actually happened. And she's like long-faced, and she's like, I'm going to have to get loss prevention. Wait right here. I was like, oh, fuck. I'm going to jail. This is like my third amend I've ever made. I'm brand new, right? And they told me Walmart would be an easy one. I'm like, this is not easy. And so the guy comes out, and he happens to be like a higher up in loss prevention. And I go through the process with him. And he says, give me your information. And I'm like, all right. And I'm like, I'm going to jail. Like, they're going to prosecute me for this. And a couple days later, he calls me up and says, Eric, listen, we got a real problem with addiction down here at Walmart. And we got a real problem, a lot of people stealing. And we'd appreciate it if you come in and meet with us and help us out, figure out what the hell these addicts are doing to rob us blind. And so I went to occasionally, they would call, when they wanted me to, they would call me, and I would go into these trainings, and I would teach them all the scams of how we robbed Walmart. It was crazy, right? I mean, dude, we used to go in and take like those electric razors that cost like $100, $200, or electric toothbrushes. And I would get like one of each or a couple of them. And I would have like a Walmart bag, and I would just put them in the bag, and I would walk to the return desk and return them and get gift cards, and then sell the gift cards for 50 cents on the dollar. And it was like ding, ding, ding. It was like 15 minutes. I'd have the guy that was buying the gift cards in the fucking parking lot waiting for me. Go up, hit him the gift card. He has 300, give me $1.50. Cool, I'm out. It was crazy. And so that was one. Another one.
What was their reaction when you're telling them like things like that, right? Which are like,
they're like,
stupid.
You do what?
Yeah, they're like stupid, but they're still like, damn, $150, $300. Like this adds up quick.
Every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I can't go to that Walmart. I've been there 4 times this month, drive me 2 hours to some other Walmart. And it's crazy, bro. Home Depot, same thing. But I'd have those little faucets, the expensive, thing. Those things are like $500, $1,000. I'd walk it right up, return it. And
they would just do it because they'd say, give you store credit, gift card.
Yeah. They give you a store credit card and have a nice day. And, you
just
sell,
walk outside.
Yeah. And I'd sell those to all the contractors, the Home Depot cards. So they're getting 50 cents on the dollar money.
Yeah, they love you.
Yeah, they love me. And another time, when I did all that overdosing, and 4 of those overdoses, I ended up in the same emergency room.
Wow.
Parkland Medical Center. And I would overdose 30 minutes away. And somehow they brought me to this fucking place. I drove past 5 hospitals to get here. And I was, I was not pleasant. When I thought I got abducted by aliens that first time, I woke up, I was naked. They had cut my clothes off of me. I felt a cold hand grab me to stuff a catheter in me. They were holding me down. I jumped up, punched a male nurse, started running around. They sedated me, put me out. I woke up 2 days later. Every time I would come to down there, I'd cause a scene. One time I'm running around the nurse's station in the emergency room with a Johnny wide open, naked. They're chasing me, just crazy shit. And I AMA'd every single time. They were like, please don't leave. I'm like, I'm fucking out. See ya. Ripping IV lines out of my arm and bouncing out of the hospital, going to get high, and powerlessness. Just can't not. And so I walk into that emergency room. This was a powerful one. And I asked to speak to whoever runs the emergency room at the little triage desk. And I got to sit there for 3 hours.
Of course.
Of course. And this woman comes out and says, can I help you? I said, yeah, can we talk somewhere privately? And we walk through the hospital. We go to this conference room. And we sit down and she's like, what can I help you with? And I start telling her the story. I say, hey, listen, a few years ago, I'm a drug addict. I'm in recovery. I harmed your facility here, your hospital. And a few years ago, there was a span of like 6 months that I ended up in here like 4 times on overdoses. And she's looking at me and I start telling her, I said, there's this one time that I came through and I punched a nurse. There's this other time. And she starts fucking crying.
She starts crying.
She starts crying. And I'm like, okay, like this isn't going as expected. You know what I mean? To me, it's business as usual. Like
I've done this 242 times already.
Yeah, exactly. And she says, Eric, I remember you.
Wow.
And you came in here so much and you were so dramatic with your stays and then we never saw you again. Honestly, we thought you were dead. We talked about you. We still talk about you occasionally, wondering what happened to you. And she's crying. I start crying. And she says something that fucking hits me like a Mike Tyson punch. She says, we never see people like you get well. And I was like, and I said, what can I do? We're crying, we're hugging, we're having a moment. I said, what can I do to make this right? She says, I'd like to leave your number at the nurse's station. And when we get addicts here that come here, we see them all the time that overdose. They don't listen to us. We're just some nurses. Would you come speak to them? And I said, absolutely. And over years, I probably saw, 150, 200 people bedside in that emergency room. They'd call me 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. Eric, we got one down here. Will you come talk to him? And true to my word, I'd go down there and sit next to him and helped a lot of people get sober out of that emergency room. Mm-hmm. Not everyone listened, but got a few of them. And so just very powerful experiences like that. Most of them didn't work out the way that I thought they were going to. I had one where, it's kind of a crazy story, where I'd been up shooting cocaine for like 3 days, right? You start losing your mind after a couple of days being up doing cocaine. And we had heard that these dudes that we knew had robbed a mini golf place and they robbed the safe. And they robbed the safe and I was with a couple bad dudes and we thought we were better than those dudes. And so we were like, well, they robbed the safe. They got the money. Let's rob them. And so that's what we did. And so
follow the money.
Yeah. We set them up. We went to someone that knew them and they said, come over, and they came in, and it's a long story, but what ended up happening was we robbed them. One of them had a handgun that we didn't know about. My friend got shot. I got shot at, dumped a clip trying to catch me coming out of this house. My friend got shot in the chest through here. My other friend got shot through his hand. And they took off and everyone dispersed and it was this crazy situation, And so in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna fucking kill this kid. This kid's dead. Like, you're gonna shoot at me, try to kill me. And
that was the first time you were shot at?
No. But in that situation, I'm like, it's on, right? Mm-hmm. And now I'm filled with anger, I'm filled with hate. Mm-hmm. He ends up getting pinched because some of the other people tell on him. He goes to prison for 6 years for this.
Wow.
That kid. I put him, listen, this is the shift in perspective of old self is dead, new self is different, a totally different perspective. At the time, we on the street, you shot him, you tried to kill me, fuck you. Mm-hmm. I go through this recovery process and I start to wake up to some truth around it. And I said, this guy was, in the same life that I was, but I placed him in a position where he needed to defend himself. And as a result, it cost him 6 years of incarceration. He went in as I think a 19, 20-year-old dude and came out 25, 26 after doing state prison time. And the no one told, but the state prosecuted him because off the medical records and, they had enough evidence, but no one testified. And so I write this, I go through this recovery process and like, I went from, I want to kill this kid to like, fuck, I feel really bad for him. I feel a lot of compassion for what I did for him. And so I'm ready to make this amend. And I got to this place of forgiveness with him and ownership of my side of the street, but I don't know where he is. And a lot of people live on the street. We don't have big social profiles. Like, you know what I mean? We're hard to find intentionally. And so my friend dies and I go to the funeral or the wake or whatever it was. And then I go to the after thing and there's a big bonfire and it's at night. And I walk up to this fire and I sneak between two people. It's like shadowy and you can't really see, and, you know, and I look to my right and it's him.
Wow.
And I'm like, and he looks at me and I look at him and we're both like this. And I go, can I talk to you? I put my hands out, body language. He goes, yeah, we can talk. And I walk off and I make my approach. And he says, you know, I appreciate that. And I was wrong too. And me and him shake hands as men. And you know, one last thing to worry about on the street and we're all good. I think the funny thing about the amends process and the spiritual journey and the path is like it places you in positions that you can't see. You just have to blindly do the work and have the faith and like, you know, you don't know. I got this cat working for me. He moves from Maryland to take a job for me. There's a city. It's like a top 10 worst city in the country. I grew up right outside of it. It's called Lawrence, Massachusetts. It's like a drug haven, like gangs. It's bad. I spent a lot of time there. And I'm telling him about it on like a Sunday afternoon. I'm like, yeah. He's like, bro, let's go for a ride. And they got good Spanish food down there. So we went down to the hood and I'm driving around the hood, just telling stories with this guy that I'm friends with that took a job for me. And I'm driving down Broadway. It's years later. And I see him and he's walking with some prostitute and he's about 50 pounds underweight. He's strung out on drugs. And I'm like, holy fuck. And I bust a Yui in the middle of the street. I roll up on him. I'm like, bro, I jump out of the truck. And he just puts his head down. And I'm like, what's going on? And he spills beans. He's like, yeah, dude, I'm fucked up. I'm living on the street. I can't stop shooting dope, smoking crack. Fuck, got this hooker, fucking girlfriend. You know, like, I'm like, kid's a mess. And I'm like, get in. And, you know, we were able to get him to treatment. We were able to get him to recovery. It placed me in a position to be useful to him. And he's sober today. He's in recovery. Yeah. He's living a good life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you think of this process, like that story you just told, what immediately jumps to mind for me is Delonte West. I don't know if you know this is. He's a NBA player, former NBA player who on multiple occasions, because he's former NBA player, so people know who he is, who are into sports or whatever. And if I remember correctly, there was a photo a couple years ago that went super viral online because he was at a red light begging for money. And people were like, whoa, fall from grace, right? You go from playing the NBA to now, you know, you're on the street. And there's a whole bunch of people who tried to help. I think even there's a story, Mark Cuban, like got in his car or something and I went and found him and I got him. I was like, hey, we'll help you. You know, we use the mass facility, whatever we got. You know, it's got billions of dollars. Like we will do what is necessary.
Every resource available.
I think they sent him to a treatment center and there was like some photos that came out. He was like riding horses. I mean, like the full blown, probably $50,000 a year, you know, we're going to get you well. A couple months later, photos again, he's back on the street.
Yeah.
And so I think about like your friend who you saw on the street, you were able to get him sober. Doesn't sound like you sent him to a $50,000 a year facility. No. Doesn't sound like, you know, he was going viral on the internet, any of this stuff. In that situation, it seems like somebody like a Mark Cuban did everything he possibly could. You couldn't ask somebody to do more, right? What do you think is the difference as to why one person ends up being sober and the other one doesn't? Is it just something that they have to want it? Or is there something else?
I mean, they have to want it. They have to do the work, but they also have to be given the proper guidance and direction of what work to do. And so, you know, it really is situational. Them having to want it is huge, you know, drag the horse to water type of thing. But what's interesting in that is people in recovery can speak to people with this condition in a manner, a language of the heart that nobody else can. Like, I've been here, I've been through that, I'm on the other side of it, and it's really meaningful. You know, in a broader context, I like to tell people that your pain, your trauma, we all go through it. We're all living a human experience. We all got something that hurts, right? And maybe that's a gift. You know, whatever you've been through uniquely qualifies you to help people that go through that. But what one of the things that's interesting to tie in the business aspect to this about now the addiction treatment center business starts to boom off of the Affordable Health Care Act. Private equity companies and groups and financial institutions start to flood in, and they get slaughtered on their first round, and more in the modern day, they're smarter money. But the next frontier that private equity groups have to figure out in order to be successful in this business is that. And what I mean by that, and I've had management meetings, I've met with plenty of groups, and I'm like, listen, until you guys in your suits and your Harvard MBAs, until you guys figure out that kid with a criminal record and a face tattoo, who's an employee, is one of the most important people in this facility, you're going to fuck this business up over and over and over again. Because what they're doing is they're coming in and you look at what they do. They buy veterinary clinics, dentists, these different healthcare, urgent care clinics, and they consolidate and they systemize and they KPI them to death and they sterilize the business and everything is process driven and blah, blah, blah. This is a business that must include the language of the heart. And it's like those guys don't do a good job all the time. Some do, but really understanding that piece of it. That, when you buy a veterinary clinic, you don't need a dog to help dogs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a tooth to be a dentist. But in this, you need people in recovery. You have to have that language of the heart. And so it's a lot of the trouble that the financial markets and private equity groups are having and figuring it out about this business and how to scale and consolidate,
Well, and also it sounds like maybe your star employee doesn't look like your star employee in some of these other businesses.
That's what I mean.
Right.
And so they come in and they see that guy's a threat, and they see this one that has a degree and a master's degree and is a therapist, and like, oh, star employee, bad. That guy has criminal record and purple hair. And they start to do what they do in other businesses and they sterilize them. And, with the patient facing and the people that are actually going to help the people that go in there, it takes an army, it takes a village, but those people are incredibly powerful and you need them.
Yeah. If somebody's watching this right now and they're addicted to any substance, what is like the one or two things that you think is important for them to hear?
That here's the promise of recovery, that you never have to use drugs or alcohol again. But what's even more meaningful is you never have to want to. And so that you can absolutely live a life of freedom from the obsession of drink and drug, and freedom from the pain of what sobriety is, if you're willing and able to do the work. That is absolutely possible for you. And that if you can do the work, that you have I got sober 16 years ago on the run for armed robbery amongst a bunch of other crap, a fucking degenerate that didn't have a single friend in the world. I had no idea my life was ending up like this. One foot in front of the other, do the work, persevere, and you just have no idea how God's going to use you and what this thing's going to look like. Yeah.
It's powerful, right? You had the experience, and I think part of what is true of most businesses is the founder, they have to care. They have to understand, right? They see the problem, they feel the problem, they know how to solve the problem. And many times, all the bullshit mantras online or whatever is, solve your problem or whatever. What is so unique about your story is that your problem, a lot of other people had it, but every single one of those people have their own story. They have their own experience. They have their specific thing that is going to be the breakthrough, right? How many times did somebody try to help you before you wanted to do it, before you found the thing that worked for you? It's such a unique thing. It's not like, hey, everyone needs a, fucking piece of software to do Excel. Like, okay, got it. It counts. This is a much more personal, emotional thing. And while that is more challenging, it's also much more valuable when you figure it out as you guys did, which I think, people kind of, it's a hard business, it seems like, right?
It's a very hard business.
But they can be very valuable when you figure it out.
I agree. It's a labor of love.
Yeah. Where can we send people to find you online if they want to learn more?
Instagram is the best place, at Eric Spofford. Find me there.
Awesome. Listen, thank you so much for doing this.
Appreciate you.
We definitely want to do it again in the future as you go build the business all over again.
That's it. Crazy.